All right, we are ready to start.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Again, it is 10:20 a.m. and I would like to call to order the meeting of the Building and Operating Committee of Thursday, January 26th, 2023. Before we begin, please note this meeting is live streamed on YouTube and recorded. Members of the public are encouraged to watch and listen to the meeting online or by dialing into 415-569-6446 for the audio of this meeting. If you would like to provide public comment at today's meeting, and if you have not done so already, please call again 415-569-6446 and let the facilitator know what items you would like to speak to today. Madam Secretary, please begin by calling the roll.
Thank you and good morning again, everyone. I'm going to start with Director Cochran.
Here.
Director Conroy.
Present.
Thank you. Director Parr.
Here.
Director Rabbit.
Here.
Director Thier.
Here.
Vice Chair Maston.
Here.
Chair Garbarino.
Here.
And President Tirio.
Here.
Thank you. Also on the line, I see Director Giudice, Brosbull, Hernandez, Rodoni, Snyder. We're almost a full house. All right. Well, you have a quorum and you're a committee of the whole.
That's great.
I'm going to confirm staff really quick. Dennis, are you back with us again?
I'm here.
All right. Joe Wire.
Yes.
Eva Barr-Furbish.
Present.
Thank you. Kim Manolius.
Morning.
Madeline Chun.
Here.
Dave Rivera.
Good morning, President.
Mona Babauta.
Present.
Thank you. And Kelly Hopper.
Present.
All right. Excellent. And Ron Downing is with us again. He has an item to present. So welcome back,
Mhm.
Ron.
Thank
And that
you.
confirms everyone on the line.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And as Amaret said, being a part of our full house, it shows how much this means to you and how vital this committee is. And I appreciate you being there. Thank you once again. I would like to remind everyone to mute their microphones until after the staff's presentation, and remember to unmute when we open up for directors' discussion. If we have directors joining us by phone, please use your mute button or *6 to unmute yourself. After staff's presentation, I will be asking for any questions or comments on the item. Click on the raised hand function if you have a question, or press *9 if joining by phone. If there are any questions, the secretary or I will call on you accordingly. If we missed your raised hand, please do speak up. After our discussion, we will ask for any public comment. Before moving on, please follow along by referring to the page numbers located at the bottom right-hand corner of your meeting packet. And we will begin with agenda item number 3, which is to approve actions relative to contract number 2019 F058, Larkspur Ferry Service and Parking Expansion, Environmental Clearance, and Preliminary Design Study. The staff report begins on page 3, and Director of Planning, Ron Downing, is here to present the report. Ron, please begin.
Thank you, Chair Garbarino, members of the committee, and board members. The item that's before you for consideration today is to amend the contract 2019 F058 for the Larkspur Ferry Parking Service and Parking Expansion, Environmental Clearance, and Preliminary Design. This project was awarded to Jacobs Engineering Group and kicked off in early 2020. The project was to look at how to improve the experience for our riders on our Larkspur service, which has historically been our busiest transit route. Prior to the pandemic, we were leaving people behind from overcrowded ferries, and people were arriving at the parking lots and not finding a place to be able to park. This project was intended to mitigate that. One of the constraining elements of our Larkspur ferry service was the 42 crossing threshold that had been implemented many years ago. And the environmental work under this study was to look at raising that threshold to provide a higher level of service and to look at designing a future parking structure for the Larkspur service. While things have changed regarding our travel patterns right now, as we've discussed in other meetings this morning, the Larkspur Ferry is still envisioned to remain a cornerstone of our travel network on transit from Marin to San Francisco. And while things have slowed down, the projections that we have been looking at anticipate that ridership will return. It's unclear as to how quickly that will return, but at some point in the future, perhaps 8 years from now, we will be back at levels that we saw prior to 2019. Just as a footnote, while 8 years may seem like a long time from now, for us to complete the environmental work on this study and to design, fund, and build a parking structure would take us into that general time frame. So this is all relevant, and it's very important for us to continue this project. A couple of things that in this element, this item is asking for an increase in the project budget of $948,000, $260, and a project contingency of $94,826. The original scope that was submitted by Jacobs contemplated certain work to analyze the environmental impacts of both an increase in the number of crossings on the Larkspur Ferry and the impacts of how to design a parking structure appropriately sized for future ridership demands. Of course, we assumed that the effects of the pandemic would be temporary back in 2020, and we needed to get a handle on what the travel forecasting model would look like to estimate future demand. MTC had been working on a travel demand model update for their own regional travel model. That was calibrated to 2018. That model did not become available until mid last year and was not fully developed so that we could use it to estimate our own Larkspur demand. Also concerning was that it was calibrated to 2018, which was pre-pandemic levels. So we had a great deal of back and forth with MTC. We also engaged with Transportation Authority of Marin to ascertain if their travel demand model could give us a representation of a new baseline for our service, representing 2019-2020 conditions, both in terms of transit ridership and highway usage. And the consultant team, Jacobs, has been working to create a more robust travel network that would replicate today's conditions, as well as forecasting future for different growth scenarios. Again, we really don't know how quickly the ridership is going to come back, but we do know from the predictions that it will come back. And so that's an important cornerstone of this additional work that was needed to get us to this point today. Another important component of the Jacobs work was in their initial cost proposal. They were going to look at what we called a wake wash analysis of our ferry boats. In the past, it had been documented that our Spalding ferry boats created a lot of wake when they moved through the bay, and in turn, that wake would wash up on the shoreline. So that's pretty much what a wake wash analysis looks like. Jacobs' team assumed that we had data on our high-speed catamarans, which have very different operating characteristics than the Spaldings. As we got into the analysis with Jacobs, it was determined that the ferry division did not have that data necessary for them to do the technical analysis on our high-speed catamarans. So Jacobs had to go back and collect that data themselves, basically using their own collection equipment, using one of our ferries at the behest of the ferry division to get that analysis completed to assess any potential impacts from the high-speed catamarans. As you all probably know, we use very few Spalding vessels in our Larkspur service at the present time. And so putting our data looking at Spalding vessels didn't capture the full picture of what a future operation of high-speed catamarans on Larkspur service would be. The Spaldings are only used for what I call special event baseball or chase center or deadhead moves to bring a boat down to Sausalito or Tiburon. So the impact of those vessels moving forward is very small in the grand scheme of what a daily schedule would look like on the Larkspur ferry. So it doesn't factor in. So that work is in draft format on the wake wash analysis. The travel demand analysis is also in draft format. So at a future date, I will coming back to you to report on some of those findings. Another smaller impact on the budget was in terms of, we did a lot of stakeholder outreach early on in the process with the city of Larkspur, different community-based organizations, Transportation Authority of Marin, elected officials, and so on. We have an unanticipated key stakeholder who has emerged in the form of Grayton Rancheria. They contend that there may be existence of native artifacts in the vicinity of the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. They have not provided us with any further documentation despite our request. However, we need to dedicate some resources to engaging them in this project to make sure that everything is satisfactory. So because of those different factors, Jacobs has indicated they've spent an additional 2,000 hours of effort on primarily the wake wash analysis and the travel demand estimation. So therefore, the project is behind schedule. It was expected to be completed in 2023 and have a draft environmental impact for review sometime this year. They're about 2 years behind schedule because of this additional effort. Because of that, there are some cost of living increases for the Jacobs personnel included in this cost proposal. So as I said, the bottom line is to make them whole for the work that they had done that was above their scope that they originally anticipated, plus factoring in some modest cost of living increases for their staff. The total amount is the $948,260 plus the $94,826 for contingency. This would be included in the ferry division's capital budget moving forward. At this point, since we're about halfway through the fiscal year, this funding would go toward this year's efforts, and we would look at it in next year's capital budget as well. So that's my overview of the item that's before you, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Ron, for the presentation. Dennis, do you have anything that you might like to add?
Yeah, just two things briefly. One is that the bulk of the cost is the additional work. It is the wake analysis data and the traffic modeling, the additional traffic modeling. The employee wages increase is a nominal part, but it's important to recognize the inflation in the region, seeing that all employees, not just ours, see a modest increase. But the bulk of it is the vastly increased scope of work. And I just want to recognize that, it's easy to step back now and say, well, downtown San Francisco is shuttered, closed, and traffic's down. Why are we talking about this? It's important to remember that if you approve this today, you'll be following the tradition set forth by those that went before us. When the Golden Gate Bridge was designed, there wasn't a need for 6 lanes of traffic. At that day, there wasn't a need for 10-foot wide sidewalks, but they planned for the future. And the Bay Area is going to add people and it's going to add jobs over the coming years. We're not a stagnant place. Each county is approving housing elements as we speak. And so it's important that we plan for the future. So as the Bay Area continues to grow and thrive economically, that we have the requisite ability to meet the needs of the community as it grows. And so staff respectfully requests that you approve this item.
Great points. Thank you, Dennis. Are there any questions or comments from directors on this item? I know early on I saw a raised hand from Holly, but I don't see it now.
That's correct. Chair
anyone?
Garbarino, just
Yes.
to let you and also the committee know, Director Thier had to recuse herself from this
I
item,
see.
so I've placed her somewhere else in the
Great.
ether world.
Okay, anyone else? I see Dick, I see Bert, I see Chris. I feel like Miss Nancy on Romper Room, right? Yeah. Okay, Dick, you go first.
Well, I do think this is an important project, and this Larkspur Ferry and the parking and all the planning has been critical for years. And I'm reluctant to ask this question. I'm assuming you're satisfied with this consultant and that you feel they're doing a good job, notwithstanding the 2-year delay.
They're doing a great job. The delay is the traffic model that we thought we would have wasn't available from the region.
Mhm.
And so it's really not their fault, and it's not the region's fault either, because things changed. And so it kind of upset their traffic modeling process, but the team is an excellent team. Doing a great job. Each component of the team, the wake wash folks, the Secor environmental specialists, and the community outreach components, those people are all top notch.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dick. Bert?
Yeah, I'll keep my opinion until we work through the strategic plan that we're talking about. But I remain concerned about climate reality and the climate and the efforts that we're taking to get people out of cars, particularly when getting to a major transit station or anything like that. So I have probably a more cynical, you might say, or concern about where this will go. So that's all, but I'll keep my opinions until we have a better strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert, for your comment. Chris, I believe you're next, and then Mike.
No, there's a question about, so I guess there's an envisioning of a parking garage or structure, because I do remember when it was to capacity and my friends and family had to actually drive into the city as opposed to take the ferry in. And I'm actually reading a Robert Carroll book, The Power Broker, right now, and they had this whole section on the choices they made in transit in New York City back in the 50s that really damaged long-term, where they could have built parking garages at Long Island and taking the rail in, or in Jersey, taking the rail in instead of building parking garages in the city, and kind of the transit choices that were taken, in the 40s and 50s that you're having a huge impact, 100 years later. So it's kind of about, I'd rather build it there than, in the city or whatever. So I guess that around that, the parking, I mean, it's to see what size of parking structure, I guess, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, the environmental process will look at, how people get there. People can take the train, they can take a bus, they can ride their bike, or they can drive. And people have freedom to make choices and make them based on their lifestyle and what they need for them. And so, right or wrong, a lot of our customers choose or need to drive there, particularly those that come out of the Ross Valley, where we used to run free shuttles. And so, recognizing that, it seems prudent to incorporate parking as part of the project. And so that's what the board approved. I'll share one anecdote. Years ago, Charles McGlashan, rest in peace, was on our board. And he challenged me on why do we need to increase parking? This is when we increased the surface parking a few years ago. And so I challenged him back saying, so Charles, when you used to commute into the city, if you drove into the ferry terminal and the parking lot was full, what did you do? And he said, I drove into the city. And I said, that's why we need to build parking, because we want to get cars off the Golden Gate Bridge. We want to get cars off Highway 101 in Southern Marin. We want to get cars off the streets of San Francisco. And he kind of chuckled and he confessed and said that, yes, I used to drive in when the parking was not available. So that's just an anecdote, but I think it reflects, a lot of our customers previously. And so I just think that's an important thing to be aware of.
Thank you, Dennis. And Mike, I think you're next, and then Barbara.
Yeah, having heard Bert say that he will not offer an opinion, I'm actually prompted to offer a fairly radical opinion, and builds a little refers a little to what Dennis just said as well. I think every parking garage constructed now is a systemic failure. We as a bridge district, yes, we have to, and as circumstances are now, build this garage in order to keep people from taking cars into the city and give them a public transportation option for a part of their route. But that more of them are not using public transportation for more of their route, and then going that additional step toward preserving us from the effects of climate change, I think is a systemic failure. And even though we're going ahead with this analysis now, there are various points at which I hope we do not consider our having taken the step of doing the analysis to oblige us to take action to build if we see an alternative down the road. That's my radical opinion for the moment.
Thank you, Michael. Barbara.
Yes, following Mike and Bert, I have to say this, and I'm saying it just to make sure that the people that are looking at the parking and looking at that whole area keep it in mind. You know, at SMART, we struggle with first and last mile, and the San Rafael area, not the San Rafael, but the Larkspur area. As you all know, there's that uncomfortable gap between where SMART ends up and the ferry starts. So if there's some way when the parking gurus, and I know that when they do these analyses, they try to think of everything. But if they have some creative ways that any kind of parking or any kind of change that we do at Larkspur can facilitate any sort of I don't even know what I'm saying, different kinds of vehicles that might serve as first and last mile rather than always having to bring your car and park. And then, of course, always electric. As a Tesla driver, I have to say we need some charging stations more than you think. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone, for your valuable comments and questions. That concludes discussion unless is that you, David? You're doing a raise your hand like I do, right?
Well, I had my hand up there as well, but
Oh, sorry. Oh, I see it. It's sort of taupe.
well, it was supposed to match the ruddy complexion, but it doesn't quite get the Irish skin.
No, it actually matches the wall. Sorry.
To Dennis's point, and to I think the reality is, and as chair of SMART, we know this well with my colleagues. The reality is that parking is right now and in the foreseeable future a big part of commute traffic. And I was told this by a supervisor over in the East Bay. I don't know if it's true, but it wouldn't I wouldn't doubt it, that BART actually owns more parking spaces west of the Mississippi than any other entity. And if you think about it, that they are more of a parking company than they are perhaps even a transit company, but it's an integral part of their business. And I think a fixed route ferry like SMART's fixed route rail really has to draw upon all avenues to get people to shorten their trips, which is the victory. And I think if we use the idealistic line that everyone should take public transit to that fixed route origin or destination, we will be waiting decades and not being very successful. So I appreciate looking over the horizon. I would say this, as we've talked about even in our own county, building a parking garage, building parking garages that are convertible is a much better way to go. And by convertible, I just mean by not having sloping floors and having them be flat slabs that could be used in different fashion going forward. If at one point in the future, the technology comes around that people are going to be getting to that place in a different fashion. So appreciate the comments and I appreciate the work going forward.
Great. Another great comment. Anyone else with taupe or non-taupe walls who would like to speak? Seeing no one, that concludes our discussion on item number 3. But before we take our vote, Amaret, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item?
We have no speakers from the public on this item.
Okay. Colleagues, may I have a motion on agenda item number 3 to approve actions relative to contract number 2019 F058?
So moved. R.
Great, it's greatly moved. And may I have a second?
Second, Rabbit.
Cool, thanks. Madam Secretary, may we please have a roll call vote?
Thank you. We have a first and second on item 3, starting with Director Conroy.
Aye.
Thank you. Director Garbarino,
Aye.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Grosboll,
Aye.
Director Hernandez. Director Hernandez. Can't hear you.
I don't think she can hear
Oh,
you.
sorry, my microphone was in the wrong position.
Okay.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you. I have the same struggle. Director Maston,
Aye.
Director Parr,
Aye.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Rodoni,
Aye.
Director Snyder.
Aye.
Director Stephanie is absent. Director Thier is also removed from the room. Second Vice President Hill,
I'll abstain.
is that an abstention?
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran
Yes.
and President Tirio.
Not disagreeing with Director Abbott, but lamenting anyway. Yes.
All right, so you have 1, 2, 3, 12 ayes and 1 abstention.
And I can't remember, should we count Holly as well?
She's not in the room anymore, so she's
Okay,
technically
gotcha.
not here.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. That motion passes. We will move on now to item number 4 on the agenda, which is an informational monthly report from the board appointees on the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit Board, SMART. And I'll start off the report by speaking from the highlights on our January 4th board meeting, which specifically were a continuation of the emergency bridge repairs at Brazos. There's been no change since I reported this last month. We continue to wait for the long lead timbers, which will arrive late this month, which is now, and begin those repairs. Happy and proud to report that the ridership is #1 in the Bay Area in terms of recovery, but due to the rain, so that's huge, that's wonderful to celebrate. Due to the rain, ridership in October, that sounds odd because I think the rain was really actually in December, drove the ridership down a bit. In addition to that, the target for ridership for this year will be 594,028 riders. And we're currently at, and that has to be the fiscal year, 299,475. Clearly the cold medication is not aiding my report, so I am going to rely on my colleagues, Barbara and David, as well. To compare, as I mentioned, the status #1 in returning ridership, other commuter rail operators have only experienced 25 to 30%, God bless them. And grant applications, 3 major grant applications are pending. $30 million for the Windsor connection, consolidated rail infrastructure and safety improvements, also $30 million for rail systems to Healdsburg. And finally, $125 million for Windsor to Healdsburg. And then finally, there's been an ad hoc committee that has been formed to establish and review applications and recommend appointments of the Citizens Oversight Committee to SMART. And I believe there were 43 applications, which is very good and healthy. And just as an editorial, that had been a very good group that had served SMART quite well. Correct me if I'm wrong, Barb and David, I think they didn't have sort of a terminus or a time with which their commitment ended. And so that was reviewed and will be updated as well. Did I miss anything, David and Barb?
I don't think so. There were just a couple things that we struggled with, and I don't know that the bridge struggled in the same way, but the flooding wreaked havoc with rail because of the washouts.
Mm-hmm.
And there was quite a report from Eddie that made us all really proud of how they prepared for all of the floods.
Mm-hmm.
They brought in ballast. They had they'd done some things with the employees so that they could work during the evenings. Anyway, 37, of course, where it comes in, we saw some video of it that was spectacular. Also, Shelbyville flooded. So any place there was a low-lying area and the tracks ran along, it all washed out. The other thing that I saw as we were talking earlier, I went back over some of my SMART notes. And I guess I hadn't pulled this out before, but 13% of the riders on SMART are youth that use it to get to school or someplace where youth gather, I guess I should say. So I'll let David talk about the parcels that we purchased. Is that all right with you, David? That's your area.
Oh, yeah, no, I appreciate that. And yeah, Smart did enter into a purchase agreement for, it's a total of 5 parcels, but I'm not even sure if it equals an acre of some land that was kind of split into smaller pieces at the corner, if you're familiar in Petaluma, right across from the Smart station at the corner of Lakeville and D Street. The good thing is it's truly only valuable for Smart since we own the additional right-of-way spur track behind it. So not knowing yet exactly what will happen on this parcel across the street and where the parking will go. Speaking of parking, even though there's not a project because that would involve CEQA, we're holding this land for future uses. And it was a smart move and it came at the right price and it was an opportunity that I think we couldn't pass up. I will mention this too on the Citizens Oversight Committee. You know, originally it was envisioned and the authority was in the measure to very limited to really just follow the measure and the expenditure plan and make sure that was being followed. And Smart wanting to have a broader advisory body revise the bylaws for that committee to include a little broader participation. And as you all know, Smart has a small staff, so instead of setting up a new committee, we just let that committee grow. And I think even today there's interviews going on or some selection of the 46 people who had put their names in to be on that committee. So that'll be good going forward. The one last thing, and I'm not sure if Dennis is going to talk about it, it's big for Smart because it really talks about the extensions going north into Windsor and into Healdsburg, Cloverdale, and beyond, is that yesterday we received preliminarily, I should say, very, very, very good news that RM3 has finally made its way through the California State Supreme Court. And I think that it's dismissed and remanded, which as you attorneys in the room can tell me what that truly means, but I think that means that we won. I think we have to wait for, I'm sure there's probably a time for a motion for reconsideration and all the other things before it becomes final. But it was a huge day, not only for Smart, but for everyone who has projects, including Golden Gate. Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, but San Rafael Transit Center has some RM3 money. Ferry enhancements have some RM3 money. Express bus lanes, RM3 money, and assorted other projects in and around the area. So Highway 37 in the North Bay. So very, very happy to finally, after years of that going through the legal process, to come out the other side. And I'm not sure what it'll mean in terms of precedent on the Howard Jarvis argument that it needed to have a 2/3 as opposed to the 50%, and how the court will actually opine on that and if it makes any difference for other projects going forward. But we're just happy that those dollars can come out of escrow in the near future and go to the projects that they were intended for, including some here at the bridge itself. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Barbara. Are there any board members who have comments or questions regarding the SMART report? And I don't see any hands. I don't know if you do, Amaret.
I see no hands up.
Okay, that concludes discussion on item number 4. But before we move on, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
We have no speakers from the public.
Okay, no action is required for item number 4. So we will continue on to item number 5, the status report on engineering projects. Begins on page 9 of your packet, and Ava will present her report. Ava, please proceed with your informational report.
Chair Garbarino, members of the committee, my written report is before you, and I would like to update the status of one of engineering projects. This is the Suicide Deterrent System Rescue Training Net. Since the engineer's report was issued, we had last Tuesday, we had a bid opening. You may recall that our first bidding attempt was unsuccessful, but this time around we received 2 bids, and on the surface, they look solid. We're still reviewing them, but this is a great relief because we truly need to build this project. As you know, we are cooperating with the Southern Marine Fire Department, and this is where this rescue training net will be constructed. So with this, I'm available to any questions that the committee may have for me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ava. Good news. Colleagues, any questions for Ava on the engineering report? And I see Jim. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. And Ava, you already answered one of my questions relative to the bid. My other question is on page 39. And let me make sure I've got this right. And it's, do we have a completion date on the elevator project?
Well, not quite. You may recall that I had to report previously that we have delay in receiving the equipment for the control of the new elevator. And as of now, we are still uncertain when this equipment will be delivered. We're working closely with the contractor. However, it may be additional 2-3 weeks delay to the project. So right now, I don't see we can complete and have this in operation by end of March. It will be probably sometime in April.
Then a follow-up would be, how is this going to affect our March meeting?
I probably should refer this to Amoret. She's
Right.
working really hard to have arrangements made for another site away from our administration building.
That's correct. I'm working on a March meeting to take place in San Francisco, and I'm trying to have a April meeting as a backup if it's also not completed by then in Marin to try and kind of like rotate the locations to help out.
Spread it around.
Yeah. So right now we're locking up agreements with these facilities and making sure that they're available to us. So I haven't quite signed my name on the dotted line yet because I'm looking at the terms now. We're getting insurance and all that together.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, both of you.
Great. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone. There's no action required or associated with item number 5. Amoret, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item or address this committee under item number 6, which is also public comment?
We have no speakers for B&O.
Okay. Thank you. We've reached the end of the agenda. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Bert. Is there a
Second.
second? Thank you, Jim. Hearing no objections, I imagine this concludes the meeting of the Building and Operating Committee. Thank you, colleagues.